Good morning, and thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. It's a privilege to follow you, and let me acknowledge the Philippines' key role in promoting the services agenda. I'm speaking to you from lockdown Melbourne, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you all as we commence this dialogue. We've got a strong history of successful services events, jointly hosted by the Asia Pacific Services Coalition and ABAC. It continues the valuable practice of close engagement between the public and private sectors on services issues. In this period of what is hopefully the twilight of the pandemic and the dawn of recovery, it's possibly the most important time for this dialogue. The values of these dialogue goes to the heart of what drives ABAC. We believe that the best regional outcomes are achieved when business and government work together. We, ABAC, carry the voice of business when we talk to ministers and leaders, so we need to ensure we have your insights. In my view, while the service sector in various of its manifestations has been one of the hardest hit by the pandemic, it is also one of the most critical sectors to accelerating and ensuring the region's economic recovery. Historically, trade policy was dominated by the rules associated with trade in goods, with services running a distant second in terms of attention and perceived importance. That narrative moved significantly well before 2020, as the world became increasingly mobile and trade more globalized. The supply chains expanded across borders, manufacturers and agriculture all became more dependent upon services support, and digital technologies enabled services to be delivered everywhere and at any time. And then COVID came. The world focused on the greatest health challenge of 100 years. Extensive restrictions were imposed on almost all economies, and our health systems and economies came close to being overwhelmed. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on many of our services industries, with many businesses unlikely to ever recover, and with consequences to be felt for years in every corner of our economies. For the travel, tourism, transport, and creative industries, especially, but not on their own, the pandemic has been catastrophic. According to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, services last year suffered a 15% decline. The WTO reports that global economic activity so far this year indicates merchandise trade has lifted beyond its pre-pandemic peak, that global merchandise trade volume growth is now forecasted at 11%, up from earlier forecasts, and with an expected 5% rise in 2022. Not surprisingly, services sectors are the growth exception. They're forecast to continue to lag behind goods and goods traded. Strained global supply chains and continued COVID outbreaks will impact us all for the foreseeable future. The pandemic has highlighted the essential nature of many services sectors, and indeed some, especially those benefiting from accelerated digitalization, really flourished throughout last year and this year. The world moved online for health, education, government delivery, shopping, and eating. Many adapted to and accelerated the digital transformation of their businesses. Services were central to absolutely every facet of life everywhere. As Fareed Zakaria noted in his book, quote, "The pandemic served as a forced mass product testing for digital life, and for most part, our digital tools passed." Improving vaccination rates, the recommencement of travel, and return to pre-COVID lives will bring a significant resumption and acceleration in demand for services, including those adversely affected by the pandemic. There's no doubt that services will be one of the key drivers of modern economies, and that the opportunities made possible by digital technologies are largely responsible for that. In many countries, one significant outcome of the health crisis has been huge changes in the way we all work and the way that business is conducted. Restoring mobility of people and skills will be critical in the post-pandemic world. However, for service-based economies, it's likely that there will be even more change in the shape and nature of work. It will be conducted in very different ways as business models continue to evolve. Collaboration no longer requires a physical presence. We've all learnt to do so much more remotely. ABAC's had 60 remote meetings so far this year. The doors have been thrown open to a much wider range of possibilities and opportunities, while also presenting challenges such as job losses, new measures of productivity, and concerns about privacy and government regulation. Harnessing digital transformation in a considered and strategic way will be a major driver in economic recovery. ABAC encourages APEC to develop new work programs for services, including in digital and environmental services, and also the development of a declaration on facilitating essential services. The regional business community has also long supported extending the WTO moratorium on duties affecting e-commerce and continues to do so to ensure ongoing innovation in the digital economy. I know these topics will be explored in depth during these discussions over the next couple of days, and I look forward to that. But the key for services businesses to survive and thrive, in our view, are international regulatory cooperation and consensus, clear non-discriminatory domestic regulatory structures and competition policy frameworks, the elimination of barriers, and the adequate supply of skills supported by appropriately targeting skills development. And in my personal view, with a strong focus on reskilling people whose roles have changed so they're not left behind. This year, APEC and ABAC have focused on the APEC Services Competitiveness Roadmap midterm review, as previously mentioned. The roadmap itself represents a significant achievement. It provides a targeted approach towards establishing priorities for enhancing services industries and the pursuit of services liberalisation in the region. ABAC engaged Jane Drake-Brockman, an expert in our view on the services sector in the region. She reviewed the state of regulation in the services sector and benchmarked the performance of the sector against the roadmap measures. She found us wanting. She recommended rebasing our work and taking a more forward-thinking and tightly targeted approach, and provided practical measures for considerations. ABAC will continue to engage in those processes. I commend her report to you, and I know she's speaking in, I think it's session 4. When the General Agreement of Trade on Trade and Services was agreed in 1994 as part of the Uruguay round of multilateral negotiations with its built-in agenda, we did not know that it would take until 2021 to reach any further agreement on services at a multilateral level. It is true that there's been significant progress in services liberalisation thanks to regional agreements such as CPTPP and RCEP, and strong bilateral arrangements and FTAs. But hopefully when the WTO Joint Standing Initiative on Services Domestic Regulation is conducted at the WTO Ministerial Meeting in December, we will have the first multilateral services agreement in 27 years. It will be a big achievement and one of great importance to the business community. ABAC has been a strong supporter of participation by APEC economies in this process, and we will continue to do so until the JCI makes it across the line. With the inclusion of Singapore and the US, the JSI now has 65 participants and represents 90% of world services trade. That's a big milestone, but our goal is to include all APEC economies. Thank you for attending and participating in this dialogue. And I want to thank Patrick and Jane and all the organisers for putting together such a thought-provoking program. I look forward to hearing the discussions that will take place, and let us hope that we enable our services industries as they recover from the challenges of COVID to make an even greater contribution to our economy.